Well, we're so excited to have you here today. This is week one of a brand new series, which is always a great week to get started. Our series we're doing here is called Gridiron, Aggressive Christianity, and we're really theming around this whole idea of football, hence the jersey, right? I got a team, my team. Now, you guys may have a wrong name for my team because a lot of people are confused. See, I'm from Cleveland, and a lot of people think the football team is the Cleveland Clowns, all right? It's not, all right? It's the Cleveland Browns, all right? And so we know a lot about prayer because we pray every year, right? It's been a rough lifetime with the Cleveland Browns. Every time you get a moment that you think they're going to make it, nothing happens. And I got to tell you, I've heard every joke about football linking back to the Cleveland Browns. You know, for example, I'll give you one. Like, what do you call 47 people sitting around a TV watching the Super Bowl? The Cleveland Browns. What do you call a Cleveland Brown with the Super Bowl ring? Thief! Oh, that's... Where do you go in Cleveland in case of a tornado? The football stadium. They never see a touchdown there. Oh. But every now and then, history allows me the opportunity to joke on the other. For example, I found the coolest ever knock-knock joke for all my Pittsburgh fans out there. It's real simple, guys. It's just this. Knock, knock. Who's there? Owen. 0-3. Ha! All right. I'm going to tell the same joke next week, except it's going to be 0-4. That's what I like to see. So all my Steelers fans out there, you know, in Cleveland, there's only two things. You know, our two favorite teams. Team one, Cleveland Browns. Team two, anyone who beats the Steelers. That's our second favorite team, even the Cowboys. All right, so... So let me break down this series. This is a 5-week series that we're going to be looking at. And in our theme that we're looking at the whole time is this idea of aggressiveness. And so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to be talking about the subject of aggressive Christianity. Aggressive Christianity. I'm going to warn you right up front. I'm going to be talking to guys today, and we're going to be pouring some stuff out, all right? So I'm letting you know right up front, guys, to get your ears perked because I'm going to be speaking. I'm going to step on your toes. I'm going to get in your business, all right? So today, aggressive Christianity. Next week, we're going to be talking about aggressive play calling, and we're going to be talking about the subject of prayer and how that plays into our life. The next week, we're going to be looking at aggressive training, and we're going to be talking about discipleship and what discipleship looks like. Week after that, we're going to be looking at aggressive recruiting, and we're going to talk about witnessing and sharing our faith and what that looks like to represent Jesus to the world. And then our final week is going to be the final push. And what we're going to be looking at is like, man, when we get tired, when our muscles are straining, when we're ready to give up, how to keep on going and how to push on to that next phase. You know, like when you're in the red zone and you know you got to get in, you got to score that touchdown. That's what we're going to be talking about in our final week called the final push. So today we're going to dive in and we're going to be actually laying the foundation block that we're going to be building on. So grab your Bible. If you forgot to bring your Bible, look underneath your seat. Maybe there's a Bible under there. Cuddle up with your neighbor. I don't care. And we're going to be going to the book of Matthew chapter 11. Matthew chapter 11. So as you guys are flipping open to Matthew chapter 11, it's going to start, and we're going to be introduced to a character. Now, I know some people here, you may not be that familiar with the Bible, so I want to let you know who this character is. This character's name he's John the Baptist. He is related to Jesus, okay? So they're in the same family line. And he was going out and he was calling the Jewish people to repentance. So he was calling the Jewish people back to God. Now, he was also the individual that water baptized, just like you saw, but he water baptized Jesus. And so they have a history. Now, at this moment in history, in Matthew chapter 11, John the Baptist has made a ruler, a leader, like let's say a government leader, very angry and upset. So this government leader has put John the Baptist behind bars. So in Matthew 11, he is sitting in a jail cell, and he's hearing about everything that Jesus is doing. And so we pick up the story in Matthew 11 where he sends his disciples out to ask Jesus a simple question. We read it in verse 3 of chapter 11. It says this: the question that John the Baptist sent his disciples to ask Jesus was, "Are you the one to come, or should we expect someone else?" Now, what he's saying, we've been looking for the Messiah, the anointed one. Are you that Messiah? Are you the anointed one? Are you the one that we've been waiting for? Or should we be waiting or looking for someone else other than you? Now, Jesus gives an answer to these disciples, and his answer starts in verse 4. He says this, "Go back and report to John what you hear and what you see." He said, "The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor." So what he's saying is that look at life, look at the actions that are taking place, look at the change that is happening in the lives of people, and you tell me. And then he makes this statement at the end, "Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." See, John the Baptist knew who Jesus was, and so he's saying, don't be focused on my lineage, my family. Be focused on what is taking place in our midst. Be focused on the things that are taking place, and that will answer your question if I'm the one or you're to wait for somebody else. Now, the disciples of John take that and they run off and they're heading back to the jail because they want to tell John the answer that Jesus gave them. Now, Jesus turns his attention to his disciples, the people that are surrounding him, and he begins to talk about John the Baptist. Now, he equates Malachi 3:1, which is a prophetic word. He points them to John the Baptist and said, you read in Malachi 3:1, this person that Malachi was talking about is the person of John the Baptist. And so he's affirming the ministry of John the Baptist. And then we read in verse 11 these words. Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, among those born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Yet, whoever is the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." He goes on to say, "From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has been subjected to violence, and violent people have been raiding it. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John, and if you are willing to accept it, he is the Elijah who was to come. Whoever has ears, let them hear." Now, there was a verse that we just looked at in there, and I don't know about you, but the first time I read it, I was really confused by it. Maybe you were too. It was the verse that said this. It's in verse 12 of chapter 11. "The kingdom of heaven has been subjected to violence, and violent people have been raiding it." When I first read that, I'm like, what on earth? So I went back, the King James Version, that's sort of the first one that a lot of the translations are built off of, the King James Version. The King James Version of this verse says this, "The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force." Now, if you were to trace this verse over the centuries, it's been interpreted a lot of different ways. It's been interpreted from this is talking about the Pharisees in Jesus' time, all the way through that this is talking solely about the spiritual realm, about angels and demons. In all reality, this verse applies to our lives and where we are, and that's what we're really going to look at today. If we took that verse and looked at it in a version of the Bible called the Amplified Bible, where it just sort of, it looks at the Greek and sort of amplifies it and allows it to come out a little bit more, we would read this. It says, "The kingdom of heaven has endured violent assault, and violent men seize it by force as a precious prize. A share in the heavenly kingdom is sought with most ardent zeal and intense exertion." Now, when I first read that, and I read, it sounded really negative, right? I mean, talking about things like violence and talking about things like suffer. I don't know about you, but through my 2013 ears, that sounds bad, right? But then when I read it through the Message Bible, and it's using words like a share in the heavenly kingdom, that sounds sort of good, sought with most ardent zeal and intense exertion. Or what about this one? A precious prize. So when I read that, I started thinking, well, maybe this really isn't. And it caused me to dig a little bit deeper and really look at what is the author here trying to say? What is the message that's getting across, this idea of suffering and violence? What message was Jesus trying to get across? Well, I traced these two words that I was having the hardest time with sort of all the way back. And when they originally came out and were translated in the King James Version, when this word came out, suffer, it actually had quite a different meaning than the meaning that we give it today. Suffer in Shakespeare's day actually meant to allow. It was sort of a synonym to this word allow. See, in my mind, suffer means cause pain, but in this time, suffer meant allow. And we see it a lot in the King James Version of the Bible. For example, a verse that you've probably read before, Luke chapter 18:16, says, "Suffer the little children." Jesus said that. The little children wanted to come. The disciples were standing up like bodyguards. No, you can't come. And he says, suffer the little children. And a newer translation would translate that as saying, allow the little children to come to me. You've probably heard that before. You know, Jesus said, let the little children come to me. That word there is the same word, this word suffer. When Jesus went to John the Baptist and wanted John the Baptist to baptize him, you know, there was a conversation that took place, and the words come out in Matthew 3, verse 15, suffer it be so. Read that, suffer it be so. Well, what that meant was allow it to be so, and John the Baptist baptized Jesus. So we see this word suffer, which we may think is something negative, actually simply means this idea of allowing. And so we can plug that in and say the kingdom of heaven allows forceful aggression, or what we read in the King James, allows violence. Violence? Kingdom of heaven? Violence? What is this about? Now, I don't know about you, but when I heard violence, I think of people punching each other. I think of like UFC and headlocks, you know? I think of knocked out teeth and black eyes. You know, when I think of violence, that's what I think of. But back when this was written in Shakespeare's day, a violent person simply meant a forceful person or an aggressive person. So if you were an aggressive individual, you were known as a violent individual. It doesn't mean that you had to punch people, right? It just meant that you were an aggressive individual, that you were moving forward. It didn't mean that you were using physical means to get your way. Now, a better definition or a word to use instead of violent may even be forceful, because that's sort of what it meant, like a forceful individual, someone that is advancing, forcefully moving forward. Now think about that. When we use this word forceful, it doesn't have to mean that you're hurting somebody physically. For example, you can have a prosecuting attorney, right? They can be forceful prosecuting drug dealers without ever lifting a finger to inflict a blow upon them. But they can still operate in a forceful way as they're prosecuting these drug dealers. Or another example would be a politician. A politician can forcefully pursue a war on poverty, a war on cancer, a war on drugs, without ever lifting a finger to hurt someone, actually, but they're still forcefully moving forward. This word used there, that would make perfect sense. Or maybe even a pastor, like a person like Martin Luther King Jr. can forcefully pursue civil justice, social justice, war on discrimination in housing and jobs, without ever lifting a finger to inflict a striking blow. So what I'm telling you is that we can be forceful or violent without actually, in this definition, understanding without ever hurting another individual, because we understand what Jesus' teachings said about that. So when we look at what this means, it could mean this: very aggressive in pursuing one's goals. We'll use every means possible. Aggressively moving forward, or I like this one, forcefully advancing. In fact, some translations of this saying the kingdom of heaven is forcefully advancing. That's actually another translation of that idea of forcefully moving forward. So we understand that this idea of suffer means allow, and this idea of violent actually means forceful, right? And so we see that the forceful establish it sort of by aggression, by moving forward. And isn't that what we see in the life of Jesus and in the lives of the early disciples? I don't know about you, but when I look at the life of Jesus, Jesus was forcefully advancing. He was moving forward. He wasn't deterred by people. He wasn't deterred by persecution. In fact, he wasn't even deterred by death. He knew what he was called to do, and he progressively moved forward, accomplishing what he was called to do. We see the same things in the lives of the disciples. In fact, didn't we see forceful aggression that was evident in the life of the early church? Just the fact that we are here now is because of the forceful aggression of the early disciples. And we saw it over and over and over again throughout history. I don't know if you know this, but those that followed Jesus were very often persecuted in their life. Bad things happened to them. So we would think if bad things happened to them, wouldn't they stop? No, they wouldn't stop. They kept going. In fact, it was a principle that we see in the apostles over and over again. They would not be silenced by the law that told them that they couldn't speak about Jesus. They'd pass a law, you can't speak about Jesus. We don't care about your law, we're going to speak about Jesus, right? Because that's what they were called to do. They were not silenced when threatened to be whipped in public. If you don't shut up, then we're going to whip you in public. They were not silenced. In fact, guess what they did? They got whipped in public, right? And when they were whipped in public, they were still testifying about Jesus. They still would not be quiet about Jesus. So then they were threatened with prison. Even though they were threatened with prison, they wouldn't be quiet about Jesus. Then they were thrown in prison. Even when they were thrown in prison, they were not silenced by Jesus. In fact, they just talked more. They're talking to jailers committing their lives to Jesus, other prisoners committing their life. This is a grand opportunity, guys, right? It's all about perspective, right? They're looking around and God's used them in great ways. So finally, the world comes and says, we're going to threaten you with death. If you talk about Jesus, we'll kill you. They still wouldn't be silent about Jesus. So guess what? They died. Martyr after martyr after martyr died. And even some of them in the midst of that death, as they're being murdered, testify about the grace and the truth and the love of Jesus Christ. Nothing silenced them. So we see that they are forcefully advancing. They are not allowing things to deter them from what God has called them to do in their lives. So when we look at that verse, understanding sort of these words, maybe we could say something like, the kingdom of heaven allows forceful aggression, and only forceful men can establish it, and only by being aggressive. See, when I read it like that, it changes everything, and it makes some of you guys really, really uncomfortable. A Christian and aggressive? Yes, absolutely. See, culture has come in and given us a different picture of what it means to be a Christian, but I'm going to let you know that if you're a Christian, God calls you to be aggressive. God calls you to reach for great things. God calls you to move it. See, the problem is our culture gives us this different picture of what it means to be a Christian. We got a Ned Flanders Christianity, right? And if you don't know who Ned Flanders is, consider yourself blessed, right? That's all I got to say. Ned Flanders, you look at Ned Flanders like, who is he? Is he standing up? Is he aggressive? Is he advancing forward? Is he moving? No. He's a joke, right? Everybody looks at him and he's weak and he goes back all the time and he's never consistently representing Jesus to his culture and his community. But that's not what I see when I see the early church. I don't see a bunch of Ned Flanders flying around, all right? I don't see that at all. I see something very different. But our culture gives us this picture that if you're a Christian, you're weak. If you're a Christian, then you better just be quiet. You better just get pushed back. That is not the picture of the early disciples or even what I read in some of the Old Testament great prophets and people. They stood up for what they believed in, and they were very aggressive and moved forward. Now, not only that, when we look at our culture, see, if we only look through culture to have our picture of Jesus, we're in big trouble because the picture that culture gives us of Jesus looks a little like this, right? Weak, puny, intimidated. That's Jesus. That's the Jesus. And then you look at the devil's all like buff, right? Looking like a WWF wrestler or something like that, you know, and he comes out. But this is the picture of Jesus. In fact, if you were to go around and talk to a lot of people, when they look at Jesus, this is sort of what they see. Something that is old-fashioned, but that is not the Jesus of the Bible. That's not the Jesus I serve. But that's the Jesus that so many in our culture think. And I got to tell you, the Jesus that some people in church, that's what they see when they look at Jesus. They don't see a Jesus of strength, and they don't see a Jesus that is overcoming and is strong and powerful and mighty, but that truly is who Jesus is. But what's happened over generation after generation, this consistent message has come, and our faith has just been watered down, and we've reached a place where we produce generations of weak, wimpy, cowardly, effeminate type Christian leaders. And we wonder why our culture is affected in the way that it is. We wonder why the laws of our land become more and more opposed to righteousness and values and morality. And I warned you, men, that it was coming, but that would be my question. Where are the real men, right? Where are the men that are following after him? Where have they all gone? Where are they at? Well, I found this video. It's a pastor from the West Coast talking a little bit about this subject. You may know him. His name's Mark Driscoll. Check it out.
You got around Paul when he was a young guy, or you got around John the Baptist or Elijah. I mean, these dudes seem pretty rough to me. You know, they don't look like church boys, you know, wearing sweater vests and walking around singing love songs to Jesus. I mean, guys like David are well known for their ability to slaughter other men. I've got to think these guys were dudes, heterosexual, win a fight, punch you in the nose, dude. Church today, it's just a bunch of nice, soft, tender, chickified church boys. 60% of Christians are chicks, and the 40% that are dudes are still sort of chicks. I mean, it's just sad. You know, when you walk in, it's seafoam green and fuchsia and lemon yellow, and the whole architecture and the whole aesthetic is real feminine. The preacher's kind of feminine, and the music's kind of emotional and feminine, and we're looking around going, how come we're not innovative? Because all the innovative dudes are home watching football, or they're out making money, or climbing a mountain, or shooting a gun, or working on their truck. And they look at the church like that's a nice thing for women and children. So the question is, you know, if you want to be innovative, how do you get young men? The whole war, all this nonsense on how to grow the church and how to do this, one issue, young men. That's it. That's the whole thing. They're going to get married, make money, make babies, build companies, buy real estate. They're going to make the culture of the future. If you get the young men, you win the war. You get everything. You get the families, the women, the children, the money, the business. You get everything. If you don't get the young men, you get nothing.
Interesting ideas, isn't it? Looking around, and some of the comments said really makes sense, because some of us know a guy like that. Some of us may even have a guy like that in our family, like, oh, he would never go to church. Why? That's a good place for women and children. Where are the men at? Out and making money, shooting things, right? And you're like, just what is it, you know? Well, when we look at men sometimes, I got to tell you that God put something in the heart of a man, that a man is a warrior, right? And a man does not want to be in a place, right, where they're pushed back and are told that everything about them is wrong. There's something on the inside of us that there's nothing wrong with the fight. There's nothing wrong with standing up for what we believe. There's nothing wrong with being aggressive. And I got to tell you that God has created men the way that he has for a reason. Men are aggressive. Men are people of action. Men want to fix things. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I got to tell you, even when I look at my sons or I look at boys are the same way. Boys are people of action. Boys are aggressive. Boys want to fix things. And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. See, culture wants to say there's something wrong with that. No, there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way that they are. As a culture, we've come to the place where this is now seen as a bad thing or a wrong thing. So you have boys that are told that they shouldn't be the way that they are. And why would culture have that message? Well, because there's something at the heart of the man that has the ability to bring revival and change and to lead and guide a culture in the direction of godliness. When we look at this game that we're called to, we are not called out to be weak. We are not called out so that we don't get our feelings hurt. We are not called to walk lockstep with culture. We are called to aggressively move forward. I'm talking about the church. We are called to aggressively move forward, but Christians have been trained to shut up and get in line. Christians have been told that this is the way that culture is going to be, and they just need to go along with it and keep their mouths shut. Christians have been told that they can believe whatever they want, but don't you dare try to make someone else believe the way that you believe. We have been told that our ways are old ways and that they are no longer applicable to our current culture. And some would say, why? Why? How did this happen? Where are the men? And that would be my answer. Well, where are the men? Where are the real men? Where are the aggressive, in your face, stand up for what you believe in men? Where are they? Do you know where they are? I know where some of them are. They're sitting in these seats right here in this place that God has brought you here to let you know it's okay to be aggressive. You're being called out in the midst of this moment and in the midst of this church. We will consistently be a church that is calling men to rise. Why? To be the husbands that God called them to be the fathers that God called them to be the sons that God called them to be all that God created each and every single one of them to be. We will consistently be calling men. We want men to be engaged. And I'm going to tell you, we want men to be aggressive. I'm going to tell you this, aggressiveness will never be a bad word in this faith community. We are unapologetically aggressive. Oh, that sounds good right there. I'm going to say it again. We are unapologetically aggressive. We don't make apologies for being aggressive. God called us to be aggressive, and we're going to be aggressive in the culture that God has placed us in this place, in this community, right here, starting in Wickenburg, that we will be aggressive about truth, and we will be aggressive about Jesus. Why? Because God has called us to do great things. And if we are not aggressive, forcefully advancing, let me tell you, we're never going to be able to do what God has called us to do. The forceful men establish it by aggression. And I got to tell you, if you're here today, I warned you guys at the very beginning, really, this is in many ways for you. You know, I see so many families, right? That if just the man would rise up and be a man after God's heart, the entire family could be impacted in a positive way. Great things could follow if that man would rise up and say, I want to take responsibility for my family. I want to take responsibility for my faith. I want to take responsibility. See, God's calling you out today. And if I were to go around the room and ask all the ladies to think about a man in their life, whether it's their husband, their boyfriend, maybe for some it's their son, maybe for others it's your father. And if I were to say to them, how would you feel if your son, your father, your spouse, your boyfriend loved Jesus with his whole heart, aggressively followed after him each and every single day, hit his knees and prayed for you by name each and every single day, did his best to raise your children up in the fear of the Lord? How would that make you feel? And I think the ladies would say amen. Amen. See what I mean? See, men rising up to what God has called them to do, great things follow that. But the problem is, and what I see so often is that I give that message to a man. And so a man is like, all right, Pastor Greg, I receive that. That's good. And then they go home and they look in the mirror. And the person looking back at them isn't the person that I was just talking about. Because in their mind, they're not that person. In their mind, they're looking back and they see someone that's defeated, someone that's messed up bad, someone that's made too many mistakes, someone that can't be forgiven, someone that's gone too far, that's messed up too bad. That's what they see. And so they say, okay, yeah, Pastor Greg, well, maybe that's for another guy. Maybe that's for another man. Maybe that's a message for somebody else. And what we do is we just take it, we put it on the shelf, we forget about it. But I got to be honest with you, it's not for anybody else. You know who it's for? It's for you. God brought you here in this church, in this moment, to step on your toes. I hope you like it. He's here to yoke you up and grab you by your shirt and tell you he's called you to something. When are you going to get in line and follow after him? When are you going to do what he's called you to do? When are you going to start seeing yourself the way that he sees you? Because when he looks in your eyes, he sees a champion. When he looks in your eyes, he sees someone that he created to do great and mighty exploits. He sees someone who has the ability to conquer fear if they would just put one leg up over that boat and start walking on the water like God called them to. You have the ability to do it already in you. You have the seed of destiny that is already sprouted and is growing. But the question comes, why aren't you stepping up? Why aren't you seeing yourself the way that he sees you? Why aren't you seeing yourself like a champion? I want you to think about that for 1 minute as you watch this video.
I will conquer my opponent. Defeat will not be in my creed. I will believe where others have doubted. I will always uphold the prestige, honor, and respect of my team. I have trained my mind and my body will follow. Who am I?
I am a champion.
I will acknowledge the fact that my opponent does not expect me to win, but I will never surrender. Weakness will not be in my heart. I will arrive at the cutting edge of battle and win by any means at my disposal. I accept the fact that my team expects me to move faster and fight harder than our opponent. Never shall I fail my teammates. I will always keep myself mentally alert, physically strong, and morally straight. And I will shoulder more than my share of the task, whatever it may be, 100%. Who am I?
I am a champion.
Gallantly will I show the world that I am a specially selected and well-trained warrior. My heart and my soul will be the fuel to carry my body when my limbs are too weary. I will never falter. I will never lose focus. As long as there is hope in my mind and my heart still beats, I will never give in to the evil that is weakness, and I will fight that evil with my dying breath. Who am I?
I am a champion.
Energetically will I meet my opponent. They will me. They will not stop me from my goal. I shall defeat them on the field of battle, for I am better trained and will fight with all of my might. Defeat, retreat are not a champion's words. I will never leave anything but the very best on the field with my teammates. And under no circumstances will I ever surrender. Who am I?
I am a champion.
Readily will I display the discipline and strength required to fight forward to my objective and complete that objective. I will rise when I have fallen. I will rip the heart from my opponent and leave it beating on the ground because he cannot stop me. Who am I?
I am a champion.
My opponent may not fear me, but he will respect me. And if he does not, I will make him respect me with all that I have to give. Who am I?
I am a champion.
It's our time, not tomorrow, not next week, but right now. None will say I've not given all I have to give, and none will take my glory. Who am I?
I am a champion.
History will remember me. No one will deny me. No one will define me. No one will tell me who and what I am and what I can be. Who am I?
I am a champion.
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 And when God looks to you, that's what he sees. He sees a champion, and he's just asking you to get in line with what he already sees. He's asking you that when you look in that mirror, not to see yourself how you feel, not to see yourself through the picture of your mistakes, but to see yourself through his eyes, because he created you with a plan and a purpose. That he has a destiny line on the inside of you, even as we heard in our video this morning. And that seed is growing, and I believe that it's growing right now. Some of you guys are having the most uncomfortable moment that you've had in a long time, because you know once you get up and walk out of this place, you're going to have to make a decision. You're going to have to make a decision to say, are you going to line yourself up with what God is calling you to do? Are you going to stand because you already know what it is? You already know what it is. You may not know all the details, but you know what he's put on the inside of you, and he's calling you to action. He's calling you to do something with that which he's put on the inside of you. See, we had a hard time with that. You know, Paul said to the church in Philippi, listen to this, our final verse of the day. He said this in Philippians 4:13. He said, I can do all things. I bet there were seasons in Paul's life when he felt like he couldn't do it, or he felt like he didn't know how, he felt like he wasn't smart enough, or he felt like every roadblock was coming up. But he reached a place in his life, as he's communicated in this church in Philippi, where he says, I can do all things, because he realized, listen to the second part of that verse, I can do all things through Christ, who strengthens me. He realized, in and of myself, you're right, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, and neither are you, but listen, he is. And the thing is, God shows up when you reach your brink. God shows up when your muscles are tired and you're exhausted, you can't take another step. That's when he shows up. You know when God showed up? When David took the stones and he went out onto the field with bravery and courage. He in and of himself didn't have it. Someone needs to hear that, because I didn't say that anywhere else. You feel like a David. You feel like God has called you to something greater than yourself and you can't do it. That's how he felt. But God didn't show up until he got the stones and he went out on the field. So God's waiting for you to get the stones and go out on the field. God's waiting for you to take that first step. He's waiting for you to throw your legs over the side and begin to walk on water. And in the midst of it, he'll show up. Even Peter, when he went under the water, all he had to do was look to the Lord, and the Lord reached out and saved him in the midst of that moment. You have nothing to fear as long as you're serving Jesus. The question today is simply this: will you take a step? Will you stand for him? Can I pray for you? Bow your heads with me. Father, I pray for each and every single person here, Lord. I pray for their courage not to wane. I pray, Father God, that they see this moment as an opportunity, Lord. An opportunity to draw closer to you, an opportunity, Father, to begin to step out and follow after you. But there's some here, Lord, that they may have not even started the journey yet. They may have not even taken that very first step to follow after you. So maybe you're here today and you said, man, that's where I am. You know what I need? I need to start following after Jesus. I'm on my own path. I'm in my own direction. If you're here today and say, man, that's what I want. I want to begin my path with Jesus today. I want to commit my life to follow after him. I want you just to lift up your hand. I'm not going to call you to front. I'm not going to embarrass you. Just between you and God right now. No one's looking at you. No one's looking around. Just lift up your hand and say, you know what? Today is the day I want to follow after Jesus. I see you. I see you. I see you. Who else would say, today is that day. I want to follow after Jesus. I see you. Anyone else? If you're here and you've already committed your life to Jesus, we're going to pray this prayer together. As a church, you've already taken this step. There's people all over this church that are going to take this step for the very first step today. I want you to repeat and say this prayer with me. If you lifted up your hand, I want you to say this prayer with me. Say, Jesus, I believe that you lived, that you died, that you rose again. And I believe that you have a plan for my life. I commit my life to you. Today and every day. I'm sorry for what I've done. Just walk away from you. But from this day on, I will follow you. Today and every day. Amen.